Chapter 6. Meadowlands was a square two-story federal villa with generous lawns, hedges, and a well-tended garden, set back within the sheltering trees across the street from East Park Reservoir. The structure dated back to the early 19th century, when Fairmount Park had been considered the country by Philadelphia's elite. Naturally, Dorinda figured as she maneuvered her Toyota up the drive, the city's packs would establish themselves in a place of trees and grass and game. Most of the park's mansions belonged to the city and had long been open to the public, but a couple like Meadowlands remained in private hands. She suspected Big Alex had a paw in that. She wondered if the folks who managed Strawberry Mansion and Lemon Hill knew who their neighbors were. She wondered also, not for the first time, what exactly she was doing here. "I can't," had been her initial response to Roderick's proposal. "I'm not a bodyguard. I'm a witch." "Yes, I'm fully aware of that. That's why I want you to protect me." Brute force were all that were needed. I could handle this myself. But they're coming at me with armed humans, and simply killing my attackers isn't an acceptable recourse. Your spells deflect their weapons, as ably demonstrated last night. I can use such an advantage. Between your magic and my Lupin abilities, we can put a swift end to this. No, we aren't doing anything. This is too far outside my skill zone. Can't you find someone else? I've only just arrived in America. It's not as if I have a wide range of options. You have Charlie. I can't trust Charlie or any wolf. I thought I explained that last night. Look, I know people who know people. I can get you somebody else. I don't want somebody. I want you. She set her lips. That better not be what this is really about. Some twisted trick of yours to get me up to your lair. Lair? Do people even use that word anymore? He huffed over the phone. You won't be alone with me. Aunt Letty is here, and she doesn't tolerate nonsense. Especially not from me. I doubt I'll be feeling too amorous anyway, what with my life in danger. I promise I will make no moves on you until after this is resolved. You'd better not. Then you'll do it? Dorinda cursed herself for tumbling into his trap. She made one last-ditch effort to extricate herself. I'm a witch. Do you understand what that means? I've made a vow not to cause deliberate harm to any living being. If someone attacks you, you can't stop them without hurting them? Perhaps you're not as good a witch as I thought. Perhaps I should just hang up and let your enemies get you. But you won't, he said. Will you? No. She couldn't, damn it. She'd brought all this on with her reading. She'd known his life was in danger, and she'd kicked him out of her store and her life with no more than a half-assed warning. If he died last night, the blot on her karma record would have tainted her for years. She rubbed her tired, burning eyes. I can't make any promises. I'll take what I can get. Bring enough clothes for a couple of days and whatever magic things you need. We'll look for you this afternoon. And thank you. So here she was, working for a werewolf. No one ever said witches were overloaded with sense, she thought with a mental sigh. The 3-car garage behind the house had been left open, but Dorinda parked in front of it instead of pulling in. She didn't want to look as if she'd come to stay. 3 days tops. 3 was a good solid number. Long enough to root out Roderick's hidden enemy, settle the matter, and get back to her comfortable routine. After that, she privately vowed she would steer clear of werewolves for life. Roderick himself came out to greet her. He opened the driver's side door for her. Thank you for coming so promptly. Where are your bags? That's it. She indicated the shapeless mass of her shoulder bag overflowing the seat beside her, and a small suitcase in the back. Don't bother, I've got it. He bothered anyway, lifting the suitcase off the back seat. He resisted her efforts to reclaim it. This is all? I expected more. I'm only here temporarily. I wouldn't be here at all, but your aunt sounded almost hysterical. I came for her sake, not yours. She slammed the car door. To her disappointment, Roderick refused to wince. Did you tell her the truth? A version of it. I couldn't very well come right out and accuse her own litter of trying to kill me. I managed to steer the blame onto the Duquesnes, with a little left over for Big Alex. I had the devil's own time convincing her not to ring him up. Good call. This low-voiced exchange took place on the walk from the garage to the house. At the door, Dorinda stopped and planted herself before Roderick. Let's get one thing straight. I'm here to protect you. Nothing else. Absolutely nothing else. He shrugged, expressionless. Damn wolf. She turned to enter just as Aunt Letty came out. The older woman caught her up in a hug that almost bowled her over. She let go quickly, a good thing for Dorinda's ribs. Thank Lycaon you're here. It's so good of you to come help us. We never turn down anyone in serious need. Part of the witch's oath builds up the karma points. She focused on Letty and tried to ignore Roderick, looming so closely at her back. He didn't touch her physically, but his presence crowded hers. Like letting a dog onto your bed, she thought. First thing you know, it's sprawled all over the blankets and you're on the floor. Coolly, still not touching her, Roderick nudged the door fully open and ushered the women inside. He didn't need to touch her. His alpha energy claimed her, Aunt Letty, the house, the whole property. She forced herself to stop thinking about beds with big dogs in them. I wish Charles could be here, Aunt Letty fretted. Eugene at least. You don't want Eugene to leave Lucy and Emma alone. And Charlie has more than me to look out for. Roderick shut the door. At the same time he deftly relieved Dorinda of her shoulder bag before she could stop him. He smiled down at her. Looks like it's just us. At least they had a sharp-eyed chaperone. Dorinda followed Letty inside. She stepped into a cozy parlor furnished in antique hardwoods and a few modern, overstuffed pieces. The well-used hearth still held the remains of a recent fire. Table leg looked as if it had been chewed on at some point in the distant past, and the sofa held traces of dog hair. Dorinda doubted if dogs were responsible for either. Every window looked out on trees. An open staircase led to the second floor. Aunt Letty headed for what Dorinda guessed was the kitchen. Roddy will show you to your room. Can I get you anything? There. Broth? Maybe a bit of lunch. Just the tea's fine, thanks. Letty about-faced abruptly and returned to hug her again. This time Dorinda felt her trembling. Any doubts Dorinda had about coming here vanished at once. I'm so happy it's you, dear, the she-wolf murmured, looking after Roddy. Not some stranger. You're known to the families and your reputation is impeccable. Thanks. How about if I settle in, and then we can discuss the particulars? Roderick had already started up the stairs, which left Dorinda with no choice but to follow if she wanted her bags back. She made sure to walk and not trot. He wasn't her pack leader. Nonetheless, she moved briskly. He waited for her outside a room just off the main hall. He stepped aside so she could enter. Like the parlor downstairs, the bedroom was roomy and tastefully furnished, with windows overlooking all manner of green. It also gave off a lived-in vibe a guest room shouldn't have. Whose room is this? She asked suspiciously. Yours for the time being. I'm next door. He offered up a maddening smile. This used to be Eugene's. I'm in Charlie's. There's no connecting door. I wasn't looking for one, she snapped, wrenching her stare off the dividing wall. I just want to make sure I'm not putting anyone out. Not at the moment. The pups drop in frequently, so I'm told, but none of them live here. Charlie wants to be near the action, and the girls are staying in the city with Eugene while Emma goes to school. We're quite alone. Except for Aunt Letty, of course. He brushed past her and deposited her bags on the bed. Fewer suspects to guard my back against. Unless you think Aunt Letty's the killer. No, she's in the clear. I felt that when she touched me. She's honestly worried about you. Yes, I can smell her anxiety. You can tell the same from a touch. And a lot more. More than I want most of the time. Truth through contact is one of my talents. Not that she needed it with Roderick. Didn't take it. Which to figure him out. She grinned up at him. Things will go a lot more smoothly if you don't try to touch me anymore. He huffed a snort at that. Poor Wolfie, she thought with no sympathy. She hefted her shoulder bag. Might as well get this show on the road. I need to see your room. This way. He led her a half-dozen steps up the hall to a bedroom similar to hers in furnishings and number of windows. This one, however, rocked her the second she stepped inside. It throbbed with masculinity and a sense of determined authority. Pure alpha. Roderick had already set his stamp on his temporary Dean. She shut her eyes and sucked in a deep breath against the assault of his personality. Stand firm, woman. You can take it. She opened her eyes and found the big bed right in front of her. Roderick's Aura wafted enticingly from the rumpled covers. Thank Hecate he stood behind. Huron couldn't see her face, but he could smell her reactions. She knew that by his low chuckle. What did you have in mind? He asked, infuriatingly bland. Warts, she decided. She moved to the dresser, safely away from the bed, and rummaged through her shoulder bag. She came up with 3 vials of powder in varying shades of yellow. These should do. For what? To keep anyone but you and me out of your room. Give me some of your hair. He just looked at her. She plucked at her own thick mass until she had 6 red strands pooled in her palm. For recognition, she said. Like a key code. Ah. He brushed at his shirt front and came up with a handful of stiff black hairs. He dribbled these into her hand. Shedding, he explained. Nerves. Almost at once Dorinda's own hairs coiled protectively around Roderick's. Dorinda frowned. That didn't normally happen. But then she'd sworn to guard his life. Maybe her personal magic had bought into the sanctity of a witch's oath. Okay, she said. That'll do. How strong do you want the protection? What are my options? Well, we can go for the standard alarm. She held up the vial of palest yellow. Anyone breaks into the room, you'll hear it in your head, and the intruder will get a mild bioelectrical shock. This, she indicated the middle vial, sets a net on the room. An intruder will be caught and held until one of us lets him go. She'd set the darkest vial to the side, and didn't touch it now. This one's a nerve blast. It acts like a lightning strike. Total unconsciousness with burns. Lets your enemies know you're not fooling around. If you want this one, we'll need to add blood. He lifted his lip at the 3rd vial. The net. I want whoever's behind this alive for questioning. And I don't want Aunt Letty put in danger, even accidentally. Good choice. She put the unneeded vials away and dug out a plastic baggie. She emptied the chosen vial's contents into this, then brushed in the hairs. They dissolved almost immediately. Dorinda shook the baggie for a good, thorough blend. Once I lay this down, she warned, no one can get in without one of us present. We might have to tell your aunt. Can we trust her not to tell her children? No, Roderick said at once. I'll ask her not to come in here. She's a bit overbearing, but she respects privacy. If it's one of my cousins who's after me, let them fend for themselves. All right. Dorinda began sprinkling her concoction on the windowsills. Sank into the hardwood almost at once, leaving a faint trace of dandelions. The last of it she spread in a line at the threshold, while Roderick watched from the hall. That's it. Now we let it set. You'll have to make your own bed from here on out. She started downstairs. Roderick didn't move. You haven't warded your room. I'm not the target. I'll be safe. I have other spells. Come on, it sounds like your aunt has the tea ready. Aunt Letty had set out a mini buffet on the table in front of the sofa. Dorinda eyed it with a sudden sinking feeling in her gut. The tea and
shortbread post no threats.
However, the cookie tray sat beside a generated by ABC Amber http://www.processtext.com/upclit html http://www.processtext.com/upclit html bowl of raw meat cubes, which sat beside a plate of crackers spread with some sort of beef paste. That wasn't tea smell spiraling up from the cup Aunt Letty poured for Roderick either. Why hadn't she anticipated this? Please sit down, dear, Aunt Letty invited. She offered Dorinda a cup. Sugar. Just a spoonful. Thank Hecate the tea was tea. Like most witches, Dorinda was vegetarian, though not a full-on vegan. She could eat eggs and even fish in a pinch. But if she had to work with carnivores for any length of time, things could get awkward. She settled herself on the sofa with a resigned little sigh. First chance she got, she'd have to lay in some emergency supplies. Roderick, under no such dietary restrictions, plopped down beside her and dug up a handful of meat cubes, which he popped happily into his mouth. He growled his appreciation. Venison. Fresh caught. Aunt Letty also growled. Not in this city, not these days. There's a stand-in the Italian market that sells game. I think it comes from a farm. She primly took a seat on Dorinda's other side and nibbled on the beef and crackers. Now, dear, tell me who it is who's trying to kill poor Roddy. Dorinda reached for a cookie. If we knew that already, you wouldn't need me. They knew his name so we can rule out random. You mentioned your mother and sister. Doubtful, Roderick said. They've kicked me out of England. You think that would be sufficient? I say it's the Duquesnes. I'm inclined to agree, Aunt Letty said reluctantly. Coraline's a comely girl. Of course she'd attract male attention. Your jealous boyfriend theory makes sense. Dorinda, with half a mouthful of cookie, turned on him. Your theory? Roderick chewed a meat cube unperturbed. Okay, maybe you should tell me about the Duquesnes. They're old allies of ours, Aunt Letty said. We were a single pack once. Oh, let me see, the late 1800s. Newcomers, really? Anything. Overtures to Deddy. So this was his idea. It's an alpha's duty to see his daughters make good matches. I know the rules are more relaxed here in America, but Ellis has always been firm on. Only room for one alpha bitch in the pack, Roderick spoke up. Duquesnes. Later, Roddy. Anyway, you'll get to meet Ellis and the others tonight so you can judge for yourself. If one of them is behind this, you'll sniff it out. Dorinda went on the alert. Tonight? What's tonight? Such a move would be so monumentally stupid. Oh, for Hecate's sake. Listen, I'm not that up on werewolf culture, but even I know a wolf doesn't walk into a full pack gathering with a strange human in. I thought you had spells, Roderick said. Well, I have to. That's why I hired a bodyguard. He sat up. His new posture. You're a witch. That's not quite a human. Thanks so much for the compliment. I'm still a non-were female. There's no. He lifted his lip, revealing a fong. You're coming with me, he said. You'll deal with it yourself? Thorough of you. For you. We won't let anything happen to you. And you do the same for Roddy. Dorinda stared at her. I can't believe you'd go along with this. Wolf stubbornness. She refused to look at Roderick. She saw that smug. I'll go. Now explain to me how you're going to explain me to them. Make it good, because I don't want us to die. Almost as clever as me, Roderick acknowledged. His arrogant smirk. Chapter 7. I still say this is a bad idea. Dorinda's hands clutched the wheel. The Chrysler was Aunt Letty's car, but Dorinda had been tapped as driver. She recognized it as a subordinate position assigned to the lower ranks. That didn't bother her. Deliberately antagonizing another wolf pack did. Let us go. This way. You two go in, I'll wait in the car. I can scan auras from there. It won't be as accurate as personal contact, but I'll do my best. You're coming in with us, Roderick said in a tone of finality. You're to guarantee my safety, and I personally will guarantee yours. I doubt if they'll even acknowledge you. Let them sniff you, don't say much, and we'll get through the evening all right. They won't dare raise a fuss, Aunt Letty put in. Not if they want this marriage to go through. She pressed a tissue to her nose. Goodness, what's that odor? Lilacs. Is that you, dear? Too strong, Dorinda said. Secretly she hoped so. She'd added a touch of perfume right before they left, just tart enough to muddle her scent. She was tired of every wolf within nose shot being able to read her like the Sunday paper. Sorry. That won't be a problem, will it? I doubt it, Roderick said. They'll expect as much from you. I rather like it makes you smell less like an ape. Dorinda bit off a sigh. Could nothing discourage him? The turnoff for the Duquesnes' home loomed ahead. She aimed for it, briefly imagining Roderick and his superior smirk framed in the headlights. The Duquesnes had their home in Fairmount Park West, on the opposite side of the Schuylkill River from Meadowlands. The house at the end of the winding drive belonged to a more modern vintage, possibly 1900s, nor was it as large as Aunt Letty's, though the grounds, what she could glimpse in the headlights, appeared just as meticulously kept. Where Meadowlands murmured of old wealth and prestige, Lupin Hill muttered middle class and cast envious eyes across the Schuylkill. Dorinda parked in the spacious drive, between a black Buick and a red Corvette. Convertible she assumed belonged to Coraline. Before she could slide out from behind the wheel, Roderick laid his hand on her shoulder. They may ignore you, but they'll be watching. Being ape automatically makes you generated by
abcamberalité.rt
http://www.processtext.com/upclit.html http://www.processtext.com/upclit.html Low rank. Hesitate, show any fear, and you'll have the whole pack on you. That might be a good thing. Less attention on you. They won't challenge me. Do what I say when I say and they'll accept you as part of my pack. They still won't like you, but you won't get bitten. Or I could wait in the car. Roderick ignored her and climbed out of the car. He opened the door for Aunt Letty, then for Dorinda, then strode to the front door and left them to follow. These are wolves, Dorinda reminded herself while she escorted Letty to the door. What's rude to us is natural behavior to them. Don't let it bug you. You're here on a job. Stay calm. Calm she could do. Submissive in the face of the rank-obsessed wolves that might prove a bit tricky. The young wolf who opened the door was clearly taken aback by Dorinda's presence. His nose worked as fast as a rabbit's. He didn't growl, she gave him points for that, but she figured if she could see the back of his neck the hairs would be stiff as spikes. His stare finally left her to circle between Roderick and Aunt Letty. Low in rank, he struggled for direction. Aunt Letty stepped up. This was a social milieu and a delicate one. Her forte. Is there a problem, young man? She asked pleasantly. Ah. His gaze jumped back to Dorinda. Let me rephrase that, Aunt Letty said. Is there any good reason why you're holding invited guests on your doorstep? She surged into the foyer without waiting for permission. This alpha act threw the poor young low rank into further confusion. Roderick Chase and Letitia Meadows to see the Duquesnes. She announced them. Do be a dear and let them know we're here. Roderick entered without even a glance at the Duquesne wolf. He had his hand on Dorinda's arm and drew her along in his wake. This time the wolf did growl. You can't, he started. Roderick glowered. I mean she can't. She can't come in. She's human. Miss Lowell is with me, Roderick said. Mine. My pack. My property. Dorinda heard it in his tone and did a bit of bristling herself. She stomped it down. With difficulty. I trust that's not a problem? It was, and a big one, to judge by the young wolf's fidgeting. Decisions of this magnitude went beyond his rank. I have to clear this, he said. Wait. Here. Please. He added in afterthought at Aunt Letty's dangerous sniff. He darted from the room. Well, Roderick said and shut the door. That went well. The hell it did. I told you this was a bad idea. You're in, aren't you? That's half the battle there. Now you just have to ascertain which one of them wants me dead. That part's a snap. All of them after this. And Letty and me along with you. Nonsense, dear, Aunt Letty said. No one starts a blood feud at a dinner party. Not even the French. It's bad form. No one's touching either of you, Roderick growled. His voice had that proprietary note in it again, like he claimed her or something. Like he thought he had the right. He rubbed his nose. Dorinda watched the nerves. Your sense spiking. Gee, sorry. Getting hauled into a pack of hostile werewolves makes me twitchy. We'd better hope it's one of them so we can wrap this up quick. Of course it must be, Aunt Letty said. Who else is there? Dorinda was spared answering that by the return of the young low rank. He had a second older wolf beside him. The other wolf sniffed them all, her in particular, although he didn't look at her directly. He addressed himself to Aunt Letty with a smile of genuine pleasure. Letty Meadows. Our packs don't see enough of each other these days. I understand there's an irregularity. My doing. Roderick glided forward. Miss Lowell here is my personal physician. She goes where I go. Physician. The wolf sniffed her again, more thoroughly this time. His yellow eyes widened. You're a witch. Lowell. The witch from South Street. Dorinda, she said with a big friendly smile. Sorry about the disturbance. We should have called ahead and checked with you first. Which she had suggested, except Roderick had wanted the Duquesnes off balance. The minute the evening ended, she promised herself he was getting a kick in the shins. Well, everything's all right then. Big Alex has given you clearance. That's good enough for me. I'm Albert Duquesne Ellis's beta. You must be Roderick Chase. We've been looking forward to meeting you. I'm looking forward to meeting Coraline. They shook hands. Dorinda watched with interest. It was less a greeting than a test of strength to find out who ranked where. When it came to male behavior, species didn't seem to matter. Albert Duquesne let go first, apparently satisfied. He flicked another glance Dorinda's way. Physician, huh? Do you have a medical condition we should know about? A temporary one. came on rather suddenly and unexpectedly. I thought it prudent to engage a professional. Nothing life-threatening, I hope? Roderick smiled thinly. I hope so too. As long as it isn't contagious. We had a distemper scare last year. He's clean, Dorinda said. Your pack's in no danger. All right then. Albert stepped away. What say we meet the family? He led the way from the foyer. Aunt Letty followed, then Roderick, then Dorinda. The sullen young wolf brought up the rear. He crowded so hard on Dorinda's heels that when she stopped he nearly ran her down. I'm a witch. You know, she murmured to him, low voice so the others wouldn't hear. I appreciate you want to protect your pack. But if you don't get off my feet, in my case, I'll turn you into a bichon frise. Are we clear? The young wolf backed off hastily, and Dorinda continued on her way. Every interaction with wolves, she reminded herself, was a test of dominance. Jockeying for rank. If she stayed unobtrusive and didn't show fear, they all might make it through dinner. Ellis and Nora, the Duquesne alpha pair, greeted their guests in the den. They were friendly to Aunt Letty, guardedly polite to Roderick. Since they'd been tipped off to Dorinda's presence, they didn't give her any grief. They also ignored her. Roderick occupied the bulk of their interest. As a new addition to the pack, he posed a threat to the others standing, perhaps even to the leadership itself. Dorinda carefully watched them watch him. Who among the Duquesnes might value their rank enough to commit murder to keep it? Tonight's suspects numbered 6. Besides Ellis and Nora, there was Beta Wolf, Albert and the alpha pair's 3 cubs, teenage twins Bentley and Camilla, and 20-something Coraline, the prospective bride. 7 suspects if one counted the low rank who'd answered the door. Dorinda noticed he wasn't introduced any more than she was. She zeroed in on Coraline. The Duquesne debutante was tall, blonde, and striking, with angular features and muscles she hadn't developed hefting tennis rackets and credit cards. She'd been poured into a glittery black dress that accented her athletic body. She planted herself at Roderick's side, as if she meant to live there. Her parents looked on approvingly. Dorinda had to admit golden Coraline and the dark, suave Roderick made a handsome pair. An unexpected pang at that observation hit her in the gut. Now, who was feeling proprietary? Dorinda took a breath and squared her shoulders. She had no claim on Roderick and didn't want any. Theirs was a business relationship. Speaking of business, time to get to work. The wolves had clustered around Roderick and Coraline, with watchful Albert on the periphery. Since no one seemed inclined to talk to her, she picked the young wolf as her target. Sorry about the bichon frise crack, she said, and extended her hand. I'm Dorinda Lowell. I didn't get your name. He stared at her hand like it stank. He clearly didn't want to be anywhere near her. Too bad. Are you Ellis's son? Or Albert's? She persisted. That brought his eyes up. Why are you talking to me? Because it looks like we're in the same boat. Are you going to tell me your name? Cole Duquesne, he said in a resigned mumble. His gaze slid away from hers and settled on the floor. I'm from the Wissahickon branch of the pack. I'm staying here while I go to school. The poor relation. Where packs had a name for them. Omegas. Dorinda withdrew her unshaken hand. So you're Ellis and Albert's nephew, or cousin, or something like that. We're all related. Not brother-sister. Close, but the bloodlines are kinda tangled up. That's why they're so hot to have Coraline marry outside the pack. She followed his glance toward Roderick and Coraline, chatting away amiably. Enough beside the hearth. Pickings must be slim if they had to send away to England, Dorinda remarked. Go way back. As long as she's okay with it. No reason she wouldn't be. Beats hunting up a mate on her own. He watched the happy couple while Dorinda watched his face. No hate or how so? He gets to mate. Maybe even breed one day. They've loosened up the rules, which didn't help Cole any, Dorinda guessed. Not if he sat low on the ladder. Omega's frustrations nudged him over the edge. The noise was shrill as claws on glass and went on a beat too long. Cole's lip curled. And then sometimes low rank's a blessing. You don't get saddled with some yappy, high-strung she who'll drive you scatty. Better him than me. What's that supposed to mean? You get all stiff and frowny when Coraline moved in on Chase. Dorinda stiffened and frowned. I'm only here to look out for his health. I am not a fur freak. Unfortunately, her denial came out a touch too loud. right into a lull in the conversation. The entire pack stared at her. Roderick's eyebrows climbed. Albert cleared his throat. I believe dinner's ready. Duquesnes fell in behind in rank order. All but Coraline, who had welded herself to Roderick's arm. He motioned for Aunt Letty to precede him, then escort her from the din. Given their heritage, it didn't surprise Dorinda to discover the dining room was the largest and most elaborate room in Lupin Hill. The hunt and subsequent length of the room and had been set up family style, with plates and bowls of dishes, a lot of it tartare. Thank Hecate she'd had the foresight to tuck some granola bars into her bag. The table, Nora on one side of him, Albert on the other. Aunt Letty took the seat beside Albert. Coraline sat next to her mother and pulled Roderick down. Both Nora and Coraline scowled. Roderick shook his head minutely. Well, fine. Prickly wolves and her annoying humanity. A brief scuffle ensued between the twins over who would sit beside Aunt Letty, while Bentley slouched next to her. He wasn't so dejected he couldn't shoot a growl at Cole when the Omega tried to sit next to him. Cole skipped a seat and, feeding seriously, Ellis as alpha male began the meal. All plates were passed to him first. He ceremoniously placed the choicest cuts on Nora's members and the guests. Mostly. Very little reached Cole and Dorinda at the Omega end of the table. Backed down with no protest, but his eyes smoldered. Roderick, Dorinda noticed, saw to it the few grain and vegetable selections made it down to her. She also discovered she was receiving the rarest, bloodiest cuts of meat. Quick, grateful smile. The twins noticed this and didn't like it. The meat stopped coming her way. Sorry we don't have any bananas, Camilla said with a bright baring of teeth. Or manners, Dorinda projected directly into her head, and had the satisfaction of hearing the little bitch yelp. Telepathy was one of her minor skills, and when some snotty mutt wouldn't stop nipping at you, sorry, which she berated herself only seconds later. You're no wolf. Rank's unimportant. Use your magic on something that matters. Like ferreting. With appetites now sated, conversing resumed in laughter, small talk and lots. Attentively, Roderick's attention was split between Albert's pointed inquiries and the vivacious Coraline. Relaxed, full-fed, at ease the wolves would have. Perfect time. Dorinda took a sip of water and went aura sniffing. This wasn't her favorite method of divining secrets, nor was it the most accurate. Touch would tell her more. However, in this crowd even a casual let her physical eyes unfocus and her inner eye take over. The room took on an overlay of red. Powerful excitement, greed. That she expected from a room full of carnivores high on the reek of meat. Hard black streaks darted through the red, indicating suspicion and hostility, aimed her way. She tried not to take it personally, which equaled human in the whir points. She narrowed her focus until she had each participant pinpointed. Cole, closest to her, radiated anxious orange, his resentment over his position assuaged somewhat by food. The twins roiled purple with restless energy. Albert's darker, watchful blue was punctuated by a yellow undercurrent of general alertness. Some of that he directed at Roderick, but no more than one would expect from a beta concerned for his alpha's safety. Right off she noted excitement. They didn't want Roderick dead. Far from it. So bad even Dorinda could taste it, bad enough to crawl like low rankers before Bernadette Chase in order to set this up. She averted her mental eye from the harsh yellow-green of their auras. This game. Dorinda fixed her attention on Coraline, looking for an excuse to erupt. She liked her fun and she liked it fast and hard. At the moment she liked Roderick with an intensity that seared Dorinda's senses around the edges. Okay, so Coraline wasn't out to kill him. Not by traditional methods anyway. Small wonder her parents were desperate to marry her off. Desperation seemed to power all three wolves. Beneath Coraline's fiery mating urge, Dorinda had sensed that same anxiety that tainted the alpha's auras. And she'd better make the most of it. A feeling shared and encouraged by Ellis and Nora. County was practically rife with them. Were the Duquesnes that determined to forge an alliance with the Chases? One had to wonder why. And Dorinda had to wonder what Roderick thought of it all. Just a peek. One quick glimpse and out. Get his take on matters. She set her sex hot and raw hit her hard. Sex and impatience. His aura burned nearly as chafing at a leash he couldn't slip and so had decided to chew through. How could he contain such primal emotion? She marveled at his self-restraint. Proximity to a healthy female of his own kind sending out blatant come hither signals. He'd have to be dead not to respond. Except it wasn't Coraline he was responding to. Wouldn't even romp in a bolt hole with this skittery twit. What was mother thinking? Smells all wrong, can't take the bloody politicking. Emotions and 100 other things that shouldn't be happening. The image that held center stage in his head shouldn't be there either. Fully naked and with far more hair than she'd ever worn in her life. His want stabbed into her and demanded she reciprocate. Attracted by the force of him, her magic boiled up, questing after the source. Lusting bodies eager to steal pleasure from each other. Phantom nipples hardened under the rasp of a spirit tongue. Her astral hand made an exploratory lunge between the werewolf's legs. Hecate's tits. The room spiraled in front of her eyes. Focus, she ordered herself. Focus on. Her was Dorinda, Roderick said. Her water glass shattered in her hand. For a moment she stared stupidly at the wet shards of glass in her palm and on. Yellow eye and every nose was aimed at her. The twins looked startled. Cole edged back from the table. Are you all right, dear? Letty asked. She cleared her throat and tried again. Something went down wrong. May I be excused? Scent had spiked dramatically in a matter of seconds. She must have found something out, something that upset her. A monumental something, or she offer comfort and protection to a she of his pack, as an alpha should. Coraline hauled on his arm. Let her go. So the ape's got a bellyache. She won't die from it. He snarled at her right in front of her parents and didn't give a bite. You will show her respect. He shook her off and started after Dorinda. Ella started up, his teeth showing. Now just a minute. You two finish your meal. He rose and coolly trailed Dorinda from the dining room. Roderick would have gone after her anyway, and Lycaon bite the Duquesnes, but that growl reminded him. This was about the good of two packs. He settled back onto his chair, face tight and inwardly seething. All right, the woman. Coraline dismissed Dorinda with a shrug. Forget about her. She'll be fine. You know how fragile they are. In a simian body. Strength to spare. Not unlike the ghastly perfume Coraline had doused herself in. What did she call it? Rooting elk. It made him want to vomit or rip his own nose off, or both. Did the word subtle not exist in the American lexicon? That let's all be good fellows about this hardiness that set Roderick's teeth on edge. Its stench battered him almost as mercilessly as Coraline's hideous perfume. And mother wanted to strike a deal with these fawning tucktails? Gee, a week from Saturday, all right? Ellis said. For the wedding. I was thinking the backyard would do for the ceremony. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to hold it at Meadowlands. Letty. We've plenty of ground, Letty agreed. My daughter Lorraine was married. Roderick counted days on his fingers under the table. A week from Saturday? That's awfully sudden. I don't see any reason to delay, Ellis said. Bernadette's okayed. Good for you. He mentally snorted. Good for him? Returning to England and his home territory would be good for him. Sinking his teeth into his mother and shaking her like a rat would be immensely good. Freeing himself from the clutches of this wretched smelly she. Holding Dorinda in his arms so he could drink in her unique scent and revel in her warmth would do him the most good of all. Meadowlands a week from Saturday. I think that's even a full moon. Lycans. Smiling on all of us. Coraline squealed and shoved herself up against his side. He forced a smile into the face of the assault from her perfume and wondered what Dorinda had. Away from the psychic and sensory overload, Dorinda managed to get her heart rate back down to near normal levels. Shaking off the effects of Roderick's blatant desire wasn't so easy. He'd gotten inside her, and that shouldn't have. Her headlong flight had taken her back to the foyer. She yanked the front door open, stuck her head outside, and sucked in long, desperate drags of night air. Come on, she cursed the air. You're supposed to help out. I knew I should have waited in the car, she muttered under her breath. Please, don't go just yet. I want to talk to you for a moment. To face Albert Duquesne. I apologize for that. I hope Ellis isn't angry. No more so than usual. We were all a bit put out that Roderick would bring a human with him. He wanted a doctor. It was kind of short notice. We really should have called. It's done. Albert waved that off. He narrowed his shrewd eyes at her. This. Would it? Or silver poisoning? That cleared her head in a hurry. You're well informed. City's got dozens of qualified vets, and Letty knows the best. Or wouldn't hire a witch to treat a medical condition. He might hire one to scope out the pack he's marrying into. He chuckled. Can't say I blame him. His mother never put a paw down without sniffing the ground ahead first. He's Bernadette's pup, all right. You don't miss a trick. Should have thought of that. Something in his tone tipped her off. Why? Has your family had any recent brushes with lead poisoning? Nothing so direct. Just little things like accidents, near misses. Could be nothing. Albert growled low down in his throat. He didn't believe it. Then a wolf with ties to the family gets shot at. A good beta has to ask questions. You understand? Perfectly. Dorinda smiled. Does this mean you'd like an alliance? An exchange of information will do. We keep each other up to speed on anything off-kilter. You rub my belly, I rub? He broke off at her raised. I figured. When did the accidents start? And who's been the target? We've all had brushes. Ellis, Nora, and me. Not Coraline. You think she's responsible, don't you? Let me set your mind at ease. Coraline's all for the match and has been from the beginning. As far as a boyfriend, well, Nora's been keeping a close eye on her since her first heat. There's no one. We made sure. No one that you know of. There's no one, Albert insisted. His lip lifted just a little. Nora would. No, we don't need any loose litters. Angles. I understand. We've got the same job in a way. The lifted lip became a smile. In answer to your other question, those accidents have been happening since before Roderick arrived. Brushes with humans mostly. Males. Picking fights, cars coming at us in the street. Nothing that smells like an outright attack. But when you factor in last night, it looks suspicious. Duquesne's. Albert shrugged. You've got me. We stay clear of humans as a rule. Yes, that includes Coraline. She wouldn't run with a human male. Nora would never allow it. Scratch that theory then. Have you reported this to Big Alex? Reported what? Belligerent apes and bad drivers? Throw a stick in center. City, you'll hit a dozen of both. We can't even prove the attack last night. Dorinda nodded. I'll keep my eyes open. If I learn anything, I'll let you know. I'm staying at Meadowlands. You can reach me there. On impulse, she held out her hand. Albert eyed it, then grasped it firmly. The brief touch confirmed her assumptions. Albert was sincere, concerned, and devoted to his brother and his brother's family and their safety. All heed came from someone close to Roderick. With the Duquesnes off the list, that left Letty's brood. He wouldn't like that at all. Speak of the yellow-eyed devil. Roderick practically burst into the foyer with Coraline hard on his heels. Dorinda. Better, she said. It wasn't anything serious. I'm going to go out and sit in the car. Like I should have done in the first place. No need for that. We'll be going shortly. Sure enough, she spotted the alpha pair behind him, all smiles, carrying their coats. Already, Dorinda said. Strained. After all, I'm getting married in 8 days. Chapter 8. Dorinda insisted she was well enough to drive. That was only partially true. By now the blunt force of Roderick's desire had fuzzed a bit at the edges. That still left her nerves jumping and an annoying heat in her groin, but nothing she couldn't suppress as long as he didn't touch her, or talk to her, or look at her, or get within 50 feet of her. Other than that, yes, she could drive a car. She climbed in behind the wheel before either Roderick or Aunt Letty could protest. Philadelphia's traffic would give her something to fix on other than the wolf beside her. With Lupin Hill safely behind them, Dorinda made her report. You can relax. They're not out to kill you. As a matter of fact, they seemed eager to welcome you into the fold. Almost desperate if you ask me. Any idea why? Why wouldn't they? I'm quite the catch. Roderick's dry snort dispelled any trace of ego. Young, rich, good-looking, from a well-respected and powerful pack. Just the star they wouldn't mind hitching their daughter to. Not a moment too soon either. I thought she was going to have me right there at the table. Roddy. Aunt Letty yipped from the back seat. Don't you Roddy me. You could smell it as well as I could. Or maybe you couldn't through that cloud of musk she dunked herself in. If they want me to marry her, they'll have to bathe her first. She was a bit pungent, Aunt Letty admitted. But other than that, she's a perfectly lovely girl. One step away from heat. What were they thinking letting her run loose? Can't believe even Americans would be so gauche. Keep in mind, Roddy, they are French. I had a chat with Albert, Dorinda went on, and Roderick may not be the only target. Albert says the Duquesnes have had some close calls recently. Nothing as blatant as a shooting, but enough to put him on notice. The signs point to a non-war. The Duquesnes too? Aunt Letty said. Oh dear. So they're not after me specifically? Roderick said. Imagine my relief. Another snort. If I were you, I'd take this seriously. An outsider targeting worse is nothing to sniff at. You might have to call Big Alex after all. Not just yet, Roderick said. It could be a jealous human suitor like you said. Albert says no. He says Coraline never ran with humans. Snort the third. A lot he knows about she's, then, a bitch that far gone would roll with a watch out. Dorinda had just begun the climb up the drive to Meadowlands when something darted into the glare of the headlights. She slammed on the brakes. Aunt Letty yelped. Roderick, who had disdained his seatbelt, was nearly thrown into the dash. Dorinda peered through the windshield. She got a glimpse of 4 long legs. Grayish body, pointed ears and nose, a straggly tail. The creature bounded across the road and disappeared. What the bloody hell? Roderick roared. Something ran in front of me. Dorinda focused on the brush beside the drive and came up empty. Dog, I think. Aunt Letty leaned forward anxiously. You're sure it wasn't one of the family? No, I know what wars look like. This was too small and spindly. Do you have strays around here? Letty didn't answer. Roderick huffed out a breath. You're feeding them again, aren't you? Eugene tells me you once had a whole pack in the garden. Charlie ended up calling the pound. It's lonely with the pups all gone, and they're so pathetic out there on their own. You have to take pity on the poor things. I imagine humans feel the same way about chimpanzees. Don't you, dear? More or less, Dorinda said. She started the car up the drive again at a much more cautious pace. The house was quiet and empty. Nothing had disturbed the wards. Aunt Letty trotted at once for the kitchen. I could use some tea. How about you, dear? Did you get enough to eat? Do you want something? I'm good, thanks. Roderick made sure I got served. She met his non-committal gaze. He'd opted to put his faith in a stranger. The least she could do was reciprocate. I suppose it's apparent, huh? That you're an herbivore? To our noses, yes. A meat diet adds a certain tang to even a primate's odor. It's missing from yours. It wasn't hard to draw the obvious conclusion. Will that be a problem? For us? Not at all. Meat's for the wolf. Our human forms need variety. You won't starve. You might encounter problems with other wars, however. We hunt things that smell like you. Try some beef gravy, dear, Aunt Letty said from the kitchen. Just a little. Rubbed onto the skin so you don't smell so much like an entree. Thanks. I'll keep it in mind. The 3 of them sipped herbal tea while Letty laid the groundwork for the upcoming nuptials. Roderick offered few opinions. He seemed lost in his own morose thoughts. Dorinda dawdled over her tea for a polite interval, then finished it off and excused herself. She wasn't at all surprised to hear Roderick pad softly up the stairs behind her. She stopped before his room to inspect the wards. They've set nicely, she murmured in satisfaction. They'll hold for a week, then need to be renewed. Hopefully we'll have this all wrapped up by then. Assuming I live that long. He gestured curtly toward the room, as much an order as an invitation. The look in his eyes said business only. Silently, Dorinda stepped within. Roderick followed and shut the door. Now, tell me what you wouldn't say in front of Aunt Letty. I touched Albert, so I got a good connection. He told me the truth. The Duquesnes want this marriage. They certainly don't want you dead. Albert swears Coraline doesn't have a boyfriend, human or otherwise. Yes, she made certain to impress on me how available she is. So we're back to square one. Your cousins. Letty's pups. He growled softly. I appreciate your discretion. I can't change the reading. The cards insist it's someone close to you. Dorinda considered. That implies family, but it doesn't have to. I understand. You've left quite a trail of human lovers behind you. Not in this country. Doesn't matter. You might have a long-distance enemy. Somebody who waited until you were gone before they made their move. I'm sure you know the one. About a woman scorned. It takes money to hire assassins, especially long distance. None of the that is, the women I dallied with had those kinds of resources. It doesn't take much. A few emails, a couple hundred transferred between counts. You'd be amazed what people will do, and for how little. Or the connections you can make on the internet. My generated by ABC Amber Lit. http://www.processtext.com/upclit html http://www.processtext.com/upclit html. Partner at the store talked me into online dating once, but you don't want to hear about that. I might when this is done with. Alright, let's assume one of my romps has come back to haunt me. What has she got against the Duquesnes then? If it's true they're also under attack. That does kind of goop up the works. I can't think of any connection other than the wedding. You're the common element. It has to be someone you know. Only one thing to do then. Eugene owes me a night on the town as the last was so rudely interrupted. We'll get the pack together for a proper reunion. You'll come along and work your magic and find which one of my relatives wants me put down. We'll flip a coin to see who tells Aunt Letty. I'm not looking forward to that. Any of it. Dorinda practically growled. Herself. Will they bite me if I touch them? Lucy might. Eugene will no doubt enjoy it. Great. Okay, you set it up. What if it's one of them? I'll deal with it. One other thing. At the dinner table tonight. Oh, yes, she asked cautiously. I could have sworn I heard your voice. Inside my head, I mean. Just a whisper. I'm not sure you were even talking to me. Just my voice? Nothing else. Why, was there more? No, she said quickly. Thank Hecate he hadn't noticed. I have some minor telepathic power. I used it tonight to help scan the Duquesnes. Maybe you caught an echo or something. I assure you it wasn't intentional. He stared at her just long enough to provoke a touch of sweat on her brow. Then he nodded. This could prove an advantage, he said. Increase communication. One of the drawbacks of the wolf form is a marked lack of speaking ability. I don't suppose you understand we're too rough on my throat. Do I have your permission then? I don't want to just go diving into your head. Of course you have permission. You're trying to keep me alive. You can do whatever you need to. I thought that was understood. She nodded mutely. She'd managed not to look at him too much throughout the conversation. Whatever remained in her eyes as a result of his psychic swell, she'd rather he didn't see it. She found herself looking at the clock on the dresser instead. 11:15. Said a spell's real customers would be crawling out of their coffins and basements and shadows for a chat and a laugh. And whatever arcane needs they wanted met, she should be there for them doing the work that fulfilled her, secure in her place of power. Not playing detective in a room that seemed so suddenly tiny now that it had the wolf in. As if reading her mind, he said, "We need a break from this." His gaze followed hers to the clock. "It's early yet, at least for our kind. I'm sure we can think of something to do." Warily she asked him. Such as? He flashed her a smile. Care to go walkies? This wasn't Dorinda's first stroll along Kelly Drive, just her first after full dark, as well as her first with a werewolf. As an escort, Roderick definitely fell down on the job. He trot briefly at her side before dashing off to investigate some foreign smell or movement. Like walking a puppy, she thought, although this puppy would probably rip her arm off if she suggested a leash. Fortunately, they hadn't run afoul of anyone so far. People used the footpath. Even at this time of night, in the singular more than the plural, late night. Joggers, strollers, the occasional couple. The restless, the worried, the homeless, the lonely. And the predators. She knew when a pair of teens fell in step behind her, and murmured under her breath. They got within 6 feet and suddenly veered around her. She slowed and let them pass. Their faces held vague, distracted expressions as if they'd forgotten why they'd come out here. A truck rattled across a bridge up ahead, and they stopped to fixate on the sound, their mouths agape like fish. Their stupor would end shortly. By then Dorinda would be gone. A low woof at her heels alerted her to Roderick's presence. She hadn't heard him approach. The benefits of magic, she told him. No one gets close to me unless I allow it. And where were you while my life could have been in danger? Or your own, for that matter? His eyes glowed in the gloom. Nearby brushed the surface of her thoughts. Then he stuck his nose in the breeze and loped off to investigate some enticing odor down at the water's edge. Dorinda shook her head. Since pre-midnight still counted as early, she pulled out her cell phone. Without breaking stride. You've reached set a spell, Perry answered. If you're a zombie, press 1. Relax, it's me. Dad? Thank God. The mummy dust shipment finally came in. I've got June from Camden helping out, and you know what a klutz she is. I've managed to keep her away from the breakables. Oh, you know the Merlin tapestry? Norman almost set it on fire. We caught it right as it started to smolder. Can you talk to him? Or something? Ever since you left he's been hyper. His spines are all orange. Can you get him to the phone? Sure, let me get my oven mitts. Hold on. The receiver made a clunk. Dorinda slowed to an amble and listened to Perry stomp around the shop, yelling at Norman to keep his scales on. She'll be right with you. This was followed by grunts and puffing, as of a slightly built young girl, hefting a bulky lizard in her arms. Okay, here he is. Thanks, Perry. Hey baby, it's mommy. How's my boy? Who's the bestest fella in the whole wide world? Roderick patted up to her with a quizzical half-lift of his lip. Relax. Dorinda said. I'm talking to my dragon. He's insecure. The black wolf huffed and loped off. Perry? How's he doing? Code green. We're good again. Really, Dar, you should get a cat. The path and Dorinda passed beneath the Girard Avenue overpass. Up ahead, Roderick bristled at something across the street. Dorinda came abreast of him and spotted Remington's the cowboy atop his bronze horse, riding herd on. Passing traffic. It's just a statue, she said without stopping. You really are jumpy, aren't you? Who, me? Just because I'm holding a dragon with separation issues who could go inferno any second. No, not you. Roderick. The werewolf. He's still convinced somebody's out. Oh right. Mr. Sexy British accent. So how's the whole bodyguard thing? Working out. You gone to bed with him yet? Perry giggled. Business, right? That's how it starts. The Duquesne packs had a couple close shaves. That's the pack Roderick's marrying into. Someone may be hunting wars in general, and it may. Perry sobered instantly. I haven't heard anything. I'll ask the vamps. You. Heavy. If he isn't smoking, sure. I'll try to find time to stop in. Roderick once more at her side growled an objection. Stop it. You don't own me. Not you. You want backup? June can watch the store. I'll just tie everything down. Thanks, but I think we're good. Have you heard from Paul? Sometimes he knows. Den so he could have his way with you. You should let him have some fun for once. I'll pay cash money for details. I'll bet werewolf hickeys are. Maybe she ought to revise her assessment, Dorinda thought as she returned her phone to her pocket. Menace at her back. And that jogger up ahead at one of the picnic tables had puffing and painful grunts and had no form whatsoever. As a muscle man, however, he'd be more than sufficient. Dorinda didn't like that a bit. Over his shoulder, she sent a probe that way and hit a malevolence so sharp it stopped her dead. Not human. The presence left a sensation of fur on her. Well, that answered that. There's a whir behind us, she murmured. She squinted but couldn't spot anything, whir or otherwise. Anyone you? No. Like a wolf, though. This is different. Thinner somehow. A jackal. Dorinda wondered. At least one clan of jackals had established den Outside Germantown. He's there. Let's see what he does. They reversed direction and retraced their steps in a casual amble. Instantly, the jogger hopped up from his seat and made long, loud strides to catch up with them. At the same moment, two men at another picnic table, whom the humans had them cut off in front and behind, were held Kelly Drive. That left a dash across the grass and a dive into the Schuylkill, a perilous. Watch this. She murmured her spell. Just like the teens earlier, the two men slowed then. Jersey accents. They kept on coming. Watch what? Roderick grumbled in her head. Oh crap. They must be shielded. Dorinda halted. Roderick halted. The pair at her back, the jogger halted and wheezed for breath. Okay, she said. We all know what's what here. Are there any more of you? The tag team deferred to the man behind her. He in turn glanced across the street. Dorinda followed that glance to the cowboy. She spotted the eyes. Big or solidly built as Roderick. Longer legs and muzzle, narrower tail, lean to the point of scrawny, very much like the animal that had darted in front of their car on Meadowlands Drive. If not the same one, then a littermate. Roderick chuffed and looked up at her, as perplexed as she. Dorinda flexed her fingers, summoning power. Can't do that. Thor lolled his tongue. She reached for his mind and hit psychic static. Warded against mental invasion. Somehow they'd learned Roderick had hired a witch and come prepared. How had they found her out so fast? Snarled at first the pair, then the big man. Dorinda held up her hands. One of the tag team chuckled. Go ahead, honey. See what it gets you. If you insist. She hauled in air until she thought her lungs would burst. She shrieked. And clutching at their ears. Car alarms went off like sirens in a nearby parking area, and one unfortunate passing motorist had his car windows. And Perry called her nuts when she decided to take singing lessons from a. With the tag team out of commission, Dorinda whirled and slammed hard air at the big man. He staggered but didn't go down. Instead he pulled out a knife. Its blade caught the light with a wink that warned of silver and magic. Muscle Man lumbered toward her. Run, she ordered Roderick. He's got silver. Knife. Stupid pig-headed male. How was she supposed to fire off a defensive spell with him in the way? Roderick leaped, shifting in midair instead of sinking his dagger up to the grip of another man's powerful hand. Roderick's fist found the knife wielder's chin. Knife wielder dropped like a stone. Okay, maybe not so stupid. Still a pig-headed male. Teeth flashed before her eyes, and rancid breath slapped her in the nose. She'd forgotten the word. His jaws darted at her throat but slid aside at the last second. That much of her untouchable spell still operated. He shut his jaws on her hair instead and yanked with all his strength. Sharp flashes of time, only a wail of pure pain. Roderick, once more wolf, leaped on top of them. Thor let her go, his jaws needed to defend himself. The battle was fierce, decidedly one-sided, and over. In seconds, Thor broke free and streaked across the grass. Roderick raced. Screeching brakes and yells from drivers put an end to the pursuit. Roderick turned and loped back to Dorinda. A hand. Are you hurt? That depends. Is my scalp still attached to me? Seems to be. No blood at any rate. Then I'm not hurt. She scrambled up. Come on, we have to get out of here. Not just yet. Not without answers. The tag team was unconscious and therefore useless to them, so Roderick and hauled their dazed would-be assassin upright. Start talking, ape. Who sent you after me? Roderick shook him violently like a dog with a doll. He thrust his face and the messy way. Nobody's getting messy. Dorinda shouldered her way up beside him and laid her palm flat on the big man's forehead. She shut her eyes. The man's eyes closed. Dorinda's opened. His name's Pete Kozlowski. He's from Trenton. Local. Muscle odd-job man. Somebody hired him and his buddies. He's thinking with him. Roderick growled. I don't suppose he knows the mutt's name. Dorinda murmured a question. The man grunted. Elfie. I think that was him. You. Not a thing. Maybe he'll remember more if I rip off his.
No. No Messi, no ripi.
Sounds like that was the brains. These men. Them. She bent and scooped their attacker's weapon off the ground and thrust it into her back pocket. Now let's move. That might have gone for his pack. They had a more immediate problem as well in that they'd drawn an audience. Their occupants had definitely changed in tone, particularly from the women. What are you gawping at? Roderick blasted at them. Would Keepa were clothed once he switched from canine to human. She kept her own eyes fixed firmly on the dark flow of the schoolkill while she grabbed for his hand. We need to get you out of sight. Point well taken. They raced off to a chorus of boos and exhortations to urgency. They didn't need to run far. Not too distant from the cowboy, the footpath curved around a solid rock wall that blocked them from sight of any motorists, as well as from the police. Unless one of those cops is Charlie, they're going to take a dim view of a naked guy out in public. That wasn't a wolf. Or a jackal. I know. I've never seen a were like that. Those monkeys knew what I was. They were after me specifically, just like the others. They couldn't have known I'd be down here unless. They couldn't have known I'd be with you unless. In chorus. They're watching the house. That dog I almost ran down, Dorinda said. It looked just like the were that face. Aunt Letty. She was talking to the rock. About a foot below her eye-line Roderick barked and bolted up the path. Dorinda raced after him. Slow. She shot at his mind. We don't want to draw anybody's attention. He snarled, but he slowed to a brisk trot and urged her on with gruff. Shot by with lights flashing. The turnoff to Meadowlands loomed, and both forgot caution and ran for it. The few people out on the drive paid no mind to them. In the rush to follow the cops and find out what was going on, the agitated woman and her big hairy dog barely rated a glance. Aunt Letty was waiting for them at the door. Roderick leapt over the threshold. Are you all right? He demanded of her. I was just about to ask you the same, Aunt Letty said coolly. She took Dorinda's arm, guided her inside, and shut the door. I've been hearing the most outrageous things. Dogs fighting down by the river, naked men. Oh no. On the scanner, dear. I bought one when Charles joined the force. No, he's grown and all, but a mother still worries. She narrowed her eyes at Dorinda. Do I want to know about this? Do Canes? I'll make sure we don't. Roderick stalked into the kitchen. Seconds later, the door slammed. Aunt Letty shook her head. It hasn't even been a week. I'm going to run out of tea. Returned, Dorinda recounted this most recent incident. She gave as detailed a description of the strange were as she could remember. I'm not sure exactly what he was, she finished, but I'm certain he wasn't a. No, it doesn't sound like one of us. He might have been a coyote. Dorinda raised her brows. A coyote? I didn't know they lived around here. Oh, they've been moving east for decades, dear. Wissahickon Gorge pretty much belongs to them these days, but we've never had any trouble with them. I can't. Or Roderick, Dorinda thought. He hadn't been in the country long enough to. Do you suppose? She broke off when the large doggy door in the kitchen entrance swung upward. He immediately rose up and switched. We're stink all over the yard as well as across the street, he announced. They've been hiding themselves among the dogs. No more feeding strays. Coyote. He lifted his brows just as she had. Those little yappy stinky. And such. Not these days, Aunt Letty said. The world's a different place from those books you used to read. Some of them even own businesses, if you can imagine that. No, I can't. Do we have a coyote named Alfie angry with us for some reason? Of Eugene's friends. He's not as discreet as he could be. Dorinda dear, is something the matter? Depended on your point of view, she thought. Roderick stood beside her chair, with his hand on the back of it and his arm creating a possessive barrier around her. He was still naked, and his rampant manhood, as Perry's paperback collection liked to term it, hung. Eyes averted was becoming a definite chore. Letty snorted shrewdly. She frowned at her nephew's face, then at the source of the problem. Manners, Roddy. Miss Lowell is our guest. Took a moment before he caught on. His upper lip rose. Bloody monkey. Priggishness. He muttered and stomped into the parlor. When he returned, he had an Afghan wrapped around his middle. You need to call Charlie, he said. Investigation. If coyotes are keeping us under surveillance, he needs to know about it. So does Big Alex, Dorinda added. This could be some kind of territorial takeover. Charlie will want to pass the word along. Yes, Aunt Letty agreed. I'll tell Charles right now. Coyotes. I never would have believed it. Well, he'll know how to handle it without involving humans. This must be kept within family. She got up and went to the phone on the wall. Dorinda also rose and quietly left the kitchen to grant her privacy. Roderick followed almost on her heels, fending off attacking humans that she could do in her sleep. Worse were nightsiders like herself, and this one had been shielded to boot. She couldn't forget how close the worst teeth had come to her throat. Your sense spiking again. Reaction. I'll be fine. Aunt Letty's voice reached them from the kitchen, browbeating some unfortunate desk sergeant. Yes, he jolly well could contact Officer Meadows. His mother. Thanks for the save. Nonsense. You're packed now. Packmates defend each other. I'm supposed to be protecting you. And you did admirably against the humans. The least I could do was reciprocate. Population? Haven't the foggiest. I've never even met one, though I've heard of them. Mothers had dealing with them, and some are overseas ventures. He snorted. With money and connections, if they could afford this. She cocked her hip upwards and patted the bulge of the knife in her pocket. Whatever which spell this is going to tell me who paid for it. Kind of oath? You folk are keen on oaths, so you keep telling me. This violates our general oath to do no harm, as in threatening your life and mine. That which will talk, trust me on that. He surprised her with a smile full of deadly teeth. If I didn't know you better, I'd swear you were a wolf. He chuckled. He was standing entirely too close to her again, with only the Afghan between her and his unashamed maleness. Drat were lack of modesty. Anyway, this clears up one mystery, she said. If they're local and they've no idea I was that well known in the war community, or someone forewarned them. His brief good humor disappeared. Why watch the house to begin with unless they were waiting for me? Maybe it's all a mistake. Maybe it's Charlie they're after. He's a cop and you don't believe that any more than I do. I'm the one they want dead, and both of us know it. His lips twisted in an ugly snarl. It's definitely family. He shrugged. The Afghan shifted dangerously. Dorinda glanced away, not quite in time. Don't be. This is all quite normal for us. We need to determine who, so I can take the fight to them, and not stand around like a... That's that. Aunt Letty bustled in from the kitchen. Dorinda quickly shifted. They'd had. I finally got past that awful human and got through to Charles. He's already looking into it. He doesn't get off duty until morning. He'll call me then. Trade info, and I need to check up on a couple of things. I get the feeling Big Alex will take it from there. With any luck we should have this cleared up in another day or two. Then she could get away from Roderick and his disturbing powerful pull. Only she weren't so acutely aware of him as a male and not a werewolf. He's getting married, she reminded herself. He's made an oath to someone else. His nostrils flared briefly. You're spiking again, he murmured. I'm tired, she said, and hoped she looked the part. Attacks by Jersey. Mus'll do that to me. We all need a good night's sleep after this. Tomorrow we